use in their defense versus people that don't have money. So you see a lot of, lower, and that's really a class issue, and race does come into play.
This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Hey guys, this is Ilyssa Fuchs, and welcome to Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio. We're glad that you're with us. We have a very special show today. I am, of course, as you can see, not joined today by Stanley or Selena or Jackie. Boo! But I am here with Greg and with Chad, and we're about to give you a really great show. So today we're going to be talking about the ongoing Trump-Russia scandal that seems to never end. We will also have a news roundup where we'll talk about the killing of Botham Jean in Dallas by a police officer who was off duty. We will talk about the hurricane that's going on. We will talk about Puerto Rico, more Donald Trump stuff. And of course, we cannot forget to talk about the New York State primary election. So I am going to give you my introduction in just a second. But before I do, I'm going to pass the mic over to the people who are joining me today so that they can tell you who they are. And then we'll circle back to me. I'll tell you who we are all together, and we'll get started on this great show for Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio. Thank you so much for joining us today. And on that note, Chad, why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Hello, everyone. My name is Chad R. MacDonald, and you may know me on Facebook as the Good, the Chad, and the Ugly. So I am a gun violence prevention advocate and have been for a few years. I've been very involved with not only that cause, but many other causes that are important to people in general. I'm helping a home for the disabled called Freedom Gardens. I'm also a member of my school's PTA. So in my opinion, reducing gun violence and increasing education and help for the needy are very important things that Americans need to do. You can find me on Facebook at Chad R. MacDonald, the Good, the Chad, and the Ugly, and on Twitter at ChadMac19.
Awesome. And I am Gregory Nesmith, and happy to be sitting in with the folks at Let Your Voice Be Heard. I am a certified coach, content creator, and business consultant, and founder and CEO of Underdog Stuff. And my whole thing is about exploring how underdogs get their swagger back in today's society and culture. And if you stick around, I'll actually be on the air again, going back to back today.
Woo!
Show now on Let Your Voice Be Heard, and then at noon, the Gregory Nesmith Show.
Awesome, awesome. And so, of course, that brings me back to me. I am Ilyssa Fuchs. I'm your anchor today. Yay! I am a civil rights attorney with Conan Fitch, and I'm also a criminal defense attorney, and I'm your political and legal correspondent right here on Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio on WHCR 90.3 FM. The line, or at least it used to be, is Talk Legal to Me, which is sort of a playoff of Talk Dirty to Me. As I mentioned earlier, we have a great show lined up for you today, and we're going to be talking a lot about Donald Trump. Woo!
What else is new?
Which, by the way, and we can get more into this during the segment, Donald Trump is apparently literally going crazy on Twitter as we speak. He's like bugging out and saying that this whole thing is a witch hunt. I mean, what else is new? Every day he gets in front of his phone, he thinks that there's a witch hunt going on. Yeah, here's the problem with that is, when there's a witch hunt, you don't actually find the witches.
I gotta say, if this is a witch hunt, man, Bob Mueller is one heck of a witch hunter. I mean, he keeps just racking them up. I mean, I shared a cartoon on the Good, the Chad, and the Ugly the other day, and it just showed like a fighter pilot with, a bunch of witches on his cockpit, this is how many he shot down. I mean, what is it now? It's like there's Manafort, there's Papadopoulos, there's Cohen, Flynn, all guilty charges. Manafort pleaded guilty to conspiring against the United States while he was Trump's campaign manager. If this is a witch hunt, this is amazing.
I mean, don't get too ahead of ourselves. We don't want to spoil the fun for later on this afternoon.
Good point.
True. It's hard not to get into it, but we'll try to be as calm as possible.
Yeah, I mean, look, this has just been sort of a crazy week, and I know we'll talk more during the news roundup about the primary election, but we had a really big primary here in New York. And it was sort of exciting because, a lot of people who wanted to caucus with Republicans lost their seats. But it was also sort of disappointing because at the top of the ticket, the progressive slate really didn't pull it off, unfortunately. And I know we'll get into that some more. It's just it's one of those things. But I will say about that is there was a lot of engagement and involvement. So, that's always fun.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to hearing later on the show how it was for you personally. I saw you out and about, like literally in the streets campaigning. Also, Stanley, a lot of folks with the show. So I'd love to hear.
Yeah, and
your
big shout out to Stanley because Stanley's candidate Alessandra Biaggi actually won her race. So shout out to Stanley. Although Stanley, I hate you right now. I'm very mad at Stanley. You know what Stanley was doing the other day while I was planning this show for all of you so that we could all have a really good time on the radio, and Stanley was supposed to be helping me. You know what he was doing?
What was he doing?
He was drinking. He was literally, not just was he drinking, he was posting pictures of the drinking on the internet so that everybody knew he was drinking. And I wrote him back and I was like, really right now, Stanley? Selena and I are literally on the phone planning this show right now and you are drinking. So, shout out to Stanley for not helping, loser.
He had his moment. They won.
Yeah. I know. Well, so anyways, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to jump into the news roundup. We have some really good stories to talk about. And then after that, we'll continue our conversation about Donald Trump. This is Ilyssa Fuchs on WHCR 90.3 FM. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio. Thank you for joining us this morning. And we are back. This is Ilyssa Fuchs. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio. I am joined today by Gregory Nesmith and Chad MacDonald. Chad R. MacDonald.
That's me.
Also known as Captain America. And we have a really great show planned for you today. But, right now we're jumping into the news roundup. So as Stanley likes to say, this is the time where you get to call in and tell us about stories that you're talking about. 212-650-6903. I got the number right this time. One time I gave out the wrong number and it turned out to be like some sex talk hotline or something. No, I'm kidding. But do you remember those when we were like kids?
Well, hold on. Which part were you kidding about? Giving out the wrong number or was
No. I really did give out the wrong number, but it wasn't a sex toy hotline. But it was some kind of hotline. You remember those when we were kids?
I do.
You used to I remember real quick before we jump into the news roundup because it's actually funny. I remember my friends and I calling from the payphone at our middle school. And it'd be like, you'd reach the sex line. Press 6-9 to speak to Janine, And we thought it was the most amusing thing because we were in 6th grade. So anyways, shifting gears to some not so good news. As you may have heard, a gentleman named Botham Jean was killed this week by an off-duty Dallas police officer who was still in uniform. At least the official story that we have heard so far is that she had gotten off work. She went back to her apartment complex. She thought that she had gone to her apartment. She swiped her key fob. The door was partially open, and she then walked in the apartment. She thought that she was in her own apartment and saw an intruder. She claims that she told him to, show her his hands. He didn't comply, and then she shot and killed him. Turns out she was in the wrong apartment, and she shot and killed one of her neighbors who was in his apartment, who turns out to be a black man, and not just any black man, somebody who was very involved with his church, and who had a very good job. Not that I think that's relevant at all, because I think that the story would have been disgusting regardless of what his character is. And now we come to find out that, all these crazy weird things have happened where the police are searching his home and saying they find marijuana is in his house. And there's just a lot of these elements of the story that just don't really make sense. So just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on what's going on.
Well, let me be blunt. No pun intended. It smells like a setup. I'm sorry. This guy, if Botham Jean had marijuana in his apartment, so what? He's living at home. He's living while black, and now he can't even do that. You can't even live while black now, and you get shot by the police. That is ridiculous. And the same people who are saying that, he should have complied with the officer who shot him in his own apartment are the ones saying, Cap shouldn't be kneeling. Well, that's exactly why Cap is kneeling. And meanwhile, the cops are trying to talk about how this guy has drugs in his apartment. The officer went into the wrong apartment and didn't notice. She didn't notice she wasn't in her own apartment. I'm sorry. What was she on? She is the one who probably is on the drugs or was drunk or whatever was going on. And it smells like a setup. And it's a horrible injustice. And that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, it's disturbing. That phrase, king of your castle or queen of your castle?
Yeah.
And in this case, that wasn't the case. You can't even be safe in your own home. And my issue has been there's this presumption of Botham Jean still has to prove that he's innocent, and they're searching his apartment. Yeah. And it's been days, and I haven't heard anything.
And he's the victim.
And he's the victim. I haven't heard anybody searching the Officer Geiger's apartment.
Exactly.
Or what was she on? And then to this point about confusion, she somehow clocked out, drove home well, drove into the right apartment, then lost her faculties on the wrong floor, then got them together again, and then called 911 after this all went happen. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
No.
And then there's these raising a whole bunch of other questions that I was reading that they said, like, she didn't know him, but that she might know him. I mean, look, you're right. If it smells like fish, it probably is fishy, right?
Yeah.
Or as I usually say, but cannot say, if it smells like ish, it probably is. But, you know, like, this is just, it's also turned into this smear campaign, which is whenever somebody's doing something and they're black, even if they're not doing anything wrong, they're automatically at fault. And anytime there's a police officer involved, especially a white police officer, it's like automatically like, well, what was the black guy doing? And wait, and then it gets even better because the NRA has the audacity to then put out a statement saying that if Botham Jean had a gun, he would still be alive today.
Yeah, where were they when Philando Castile got shot?
I swear to God.
Like, you know, Philando Castile, he was shot by police on Facebook Live not long ago, and he was a legal concealed carry. He had a legal concealed carry permit. He got shot, and then the argument became, oh, he shouldn't have had a gun. So, I mean, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth here, as they do.
Yeah. Let's see what happens, but I'm hopeful for when's the investigation going to turn to Geiger, the officer, opposed to investigating the victim.
Well, I honestly don't know. I will say this, and I was reading a bunch of articles on this before we move on. I read the arrest warrant that was drawn up, and the arrest warrant is perplexing to me because I've read hundreds of documents like this, and sure, I read them in New York, not in Texas, and charging documents can differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it essentially reads like a criminal defense attorney wrote it. Yeah. And several criminal defense attorneys have come out and said, you know, she's going to walk. So they were like, if she was my client, I could already see 16 different ways to defend her. And, you know, for me as a criminal defense attorney, I always say everybody's entitled to the presumption of innocence in a court of law, and everybody is entitled to be proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But I also have never seen a situation where the prosecutors go out of their way to sort of protect the defendant. That obviously is not the prosecutor's job. The prosecutor's job is to prosecute and, in theory, to get justice. But, justice, when it does come, takes a while. And that's, of course, if it ever comes at all.
The bottom line is she was completely in the wrong. She was in the wrong house and shot someone who lived in that apartment. There is no way that she is innocent of this crime.
She's an intruder into the man's home.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing more to say. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out. Of course, I won't hold my breath because, Daniel Pantaleo is still a member of the NYPD.
I know.
After 4 years since Eric Garner's death. And he is still getting paid almost $100,000 a year. And, that's, as you said, why people are kneeling, not because of the flag. It's to protest an injustice. Speaking of injustices, you guys hear Donald Trump's comments about Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I might have caught that. I made a statement on my Facebook profile, which I will continue to stand by, and it went semi-viral. And basically, what I said is Donald Trump left almost 3,000 Americans with brown skin to die after Maria. And now he's denying they ever existed. That's ethnic cleansing. Change my mind. That's exactly what that is. There is no way to see that as anything other than racism and genocide. You put it together. That's just what it is. On top of that, this is a whole other thing, but the children being kept in concentration camps. There's more children being kept in camps now than ever were, and 3,000 people died, and he's out there denying it, saying it never happened. I mean, one of the late night talk shows said it best. He's now the first Maria truther. I mean, even the Sandy Hook people who are saying that the Sandy Hook people never happened, and those people are all scum. But they're looking at him going, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be the one place where there was still some bipartisanship and unity would be around natural disasters.
Yeah.
And even Donald Trump has found a way to make it partisan and also, as usual, about him and not about the people. And I wish I could say I was surprised, but he's shown who he is time and time again.
It's no surprise. And still, on all of my Facebook pages, I will still have Trump supporters walk in and go, how is he racist? I'm sorry. The only one who asks, how is Trump racist? Are
the racists.
Are racists.
But, and the other thing, though, that's perplexing about it is it's his own government. It's his administration that are giving him these official numbers. So we're not just at a point where it's like, oh, well, liberals or Democrats are saying X, but, our official totals are saying Y. This is just like the Trump scandal with Russia that we're going to talk about later on in this segment, where literally they're like, hey, the sky is blue. And Donald Trump's like, no, it's not. I think the sky looks purple today. And we're like, no, Donald, but it's blue. See, that's blue. That color is blue. And he's like, red? And you're like, no, Donald, blue. And he's like, no, it's red, right? It's red. And so that's sort of where we are in our political conversation.
Which is more or less what Bob Woodward said in his book. He said they will present Donald Trump with facts and he will just refuse to get it. At which, of course, Trump responded by saying that Woodward was a liar. And Woodward's response to that was, yeah, that's just what Nixon said.
More alternative facts. And remember, the truth is not the truth. Didn't you hear Rudy the other week?
No, right. That's right. Truth isn't truth. Well, we'll see what happens when we get the final numbers from Hurricane Florence, because according to the president, who's currently on Twitter, not tweeting about the hurricane, but instead tweeting about the so-called witch hunt, he wants us to know that hurricanes are big and they're wet and they have a lot of water.
Big.
Tremendously big.
Tremendously wet.
And tremendously wet. Where's Obama? I miss Obama.
He's back, kind of.
I know, but I just need some intelligence right now.
Do you know?
I can't have a president that sits here and tells me that a hurricane is tremendously big and tremendously wet. Or we're seriously living in an episode of the Idiocracy. The next thing I know, they're going to tell me that Brawndo waters the grass and that it has electrolytes.
Yeah. No, I had somebody ask me, what do you miss most about Barack Obama? And I said, being able to sleep at night. This is crazy. I wake up and there's some new crisis. There's some new horror. There's some new travesty. I'm expecting missiles to fly almost every day. He's leaving people to die in Puerto Rico. He's locking up children and putting them in concentration camps. This was something I said way back when the election was still happening. I said, we can't elect Trump. He's probably going to put in concentration camps. And I was kidding at that time, but it's happened. So, I mean, what in 2016, they said, no, those aren't Nazi salutes at Trump rallies. In 2017, they said, no, those aren't Nazis marching in Charlottesville. And in 2018, they're like, no, those aren't concentration camps. It's where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's hard to sleep at night, and we wake up to tweets.
Yeah.
And more tweets. And instead of waking up to tweets about hurricane, now tropical depression Florence, we wake up to tweets about
angry Democrats. I like half the time.
And witch hunts.
It's like word salad. It's like that line in the new Eminem song that I was just listening to this morning, where he's like butterfly, da 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 da. Something he's like butterfly, Burger King. So that's like how the president tweets, just complete word salad. But unlike Eminem, the president doesn't actually make any sense. But speaking of things that we can do to make progressive change in the world, we spoke a lot, and we're going to speak a lot more today about national politics, but of course local politics are supremely important. So before we wrap up this segment, I did want to briefly give a few minutes to talk about the New York State primary. So the New York State primary happened on Thursday, this past Thursday. Unfortunately, the very progressive slate, which was Cynthia Nixon, Jumaane Williams, and Zephyr Teachout, did not win. But there was a lot of really local race wins at the very low levels. So that was awesome for state committee races. Almost every single member of the Independent Democratic Caucus was ousted. So as we mentioned, congratulations to Stanley and Alessandra Biaggi. Zelnor Myrie won in Brooklyn. There was a lot of other really big wins. So it was sort of for me at least, bittersweet. I had worked really, really hard on the Zephyr Teachout campaign, and I was super jazzed. It just didn't work out the way I would have liked. But I think it was good because what we saw was so much engagement. So many people actually came out to vote in this primary. And after the fact, and, this is something that people can debate, but people have said, if Tish James is the establishment, that's really actually a good thing in some ways.
Well, that's just it. You and I, first of all, I want congratulate you on all the work you did. I saw you on social media with all your canvassing shifts.
Thank you.
You were busting your butt out there, and that is commendable and admirable. Tish James is actually the candidate that I supported. And what you said, if she's considered establishment, then we're in good shape. I mean, I've met Tish James several times now over the course of my advocacy for gun violence prevention. She's always been wonderful. She's always been strong, and she's always had a good head on her shoulders. And this is the thing with me. She will be taking over the Attorney General's office should she beat her Republican opponent in November. And if she does, she's going after Trump's businesses and family, and I can't think of a better person to do that.
Yeah. And just one quick question for you, Ilyssa, given the amount of work you put in, what do you say to folks who, the top of the ticket was kind of status quo in New York?
Yeah.
What do you say to folks who might be feeling a little down as we head into the general elections that will happen in November?
I mean, look, and this is for some people a controversial position, but I've always said, when it comes to the primary, you vote your heart, you vote your ideology, you back the person you really, really believe in and care about. But when it comes to the general election, I vote blue. I think it's supremely important. We are at this point in history where we cannot afford to take any chances. And I know that sometimes puts me at odds with some people that, feel like they can't vote for somebody because it doesn't match with their own ideology. They think the person's too centrist, too establishment. But I just think it's really important that we don't take any chances. Every vote counts. We shouldn't take advantage or we shouldn't take for granted the fact that New York is predominantly a blue state, because as we saw for the past several years, the Republicans have actually been controlling the Senate.
Yes.
So, my opinion is go out, get involved, vote blue in November, and then we can then put pressure on some of these people that we may feel are, people call him status quo, and I don't think that's wrong. But look, just by Cynthia Nixon running, she was able to push him to the left on certain issues, marijuana legalization being one of them. So I think, it's really important that we support the Democrats, but that also means we continue to hold their feet to the fire and hold them accountable, because that's what matters and that's what's important. On that note, we have to take a quick break. This is Ilyssa Fuchs with WHCR 90.3 FM radio. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard. We will be right back to continue this conversation about Trump and Russia. And we are back. This is Ilyssa Fuchs. I am joined by Gregory Nesmith and Chad R. MacDonald here on Let Your Voice Be Heard radio this morning. And now is the time for us to continue this ongoing conversation about Donald Trump and Russia. So, new developments this week. Paul Manafort, as you know, he was convicted a couple weeks ago of 8 out of 18 counts of wire fraud and tax fraud and a bunch of other different federal crimes. And so on the other 10 counts that he was not convicted of, there was a hung jury, which essentially means that the prosecutor has to decide whether they're going to retry him on these 10 counts or they're going to try and negotiate some kind of plea deal on these 10 counts, or they're going to drop these 10 counts. And so for a while, people weren't exactly sure what they were going to do. They were like, they're already trying him again. There's this whole other trial going on in a different jurisdiction about other charges. And, now they have these other 10 things. And, what are we going to do to be able to figure out how we're going to charge this guy and prosecute him XYZ? And so then we get news this week that he has now actually agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges to basically clear everything else up that was still pending against him. And in exchange for the special counsel allowing him to plead guilty to these reduced charges, we were going to have him singing. And essentially what that means is he's going to talk to Robert Mueller and he's going to spill his guts. And he's going to snitch out everything that he needs to snitch out. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what he knows. And so, basically, the deal was a surrender for him. For months and months and months, he's been vowing to prove his innocence, to say that he was only working as a political consultant for Ukraine, and that he didn't have anything to do with Trump or Russia or, the meeting with the Russian lawyer at Trump Tower where the story kept changing. It was about adoptions. It was about dirt on Hillary Clinton. Nobody really knows. And now that's all changed. So I think that takes us one step closer to the season finale, as they say. And so I was curious, I'll open up the floor to you guys to get your thoughts. Obviously this is just one more piece of this Russia puzzle. And, I'm not going to rehash all of the details right now about what we already know. But, this is a big deal. So what did you guys think when you heard this news this week?
I would say, things are heating up.
Yeah,
But,
that's for sure.
But I'm still not that excited yet.
Why not?
There hasn't been any leaks about all of this ties back directly to Donald Trump.
True.
When we get into he said versus he said, I don't know. Who do you trust more, Trump or Manafort? I don't know. It might be a tie. And so I'm like, it's heating up, but I don't have anything yet.
It's funny.
On Trump.
I have actually the exact opposite reaction. I used to smoke cigars, and I haven't smoked cigars in a long time. And when Manafort pled guilty on Friday and admitted that, yes, he's flipping on Trump, I went out and got a cigar, and I smoked that. I was great. I'm very excited about this because, and I'm also, to your point of how does this tie back to Trump, we don't know because Mueller is running an airtight investigation. There have been 0 leaks coming out of that. And we don't know what he's got on Trump, but Mueller has got everything. At this point, with the proffer deal that Manafort has given, Mueller already has everything that Manafort knows. Manafort's had to turn over all of his assets in forfeiture to the government. It was something like $46 million, I believe it was, and so that pays for the investigation and then some. It actually turned a profit for the government, this investigation, and that includes Manafort's apartment in Trump Tower.
Right. The government now owns an apartment in Trump Tower.
The government now owns an apartment in Trump Tower, and this is why I'm not the special prosecutor, because if I was Bob Mueller, I would set up an office in that apartment, because if you want to see Trump spin off the rails, that'll do it right there. Like, as far as I'm concerned, Manafort, Cohen, Papadopoulos,
the coffee boy, quote unquote.
They have given up all the goods on Trump. I think Roger Stone's next. I think possibly Steve Bannon's going down.
Don Jr. is going to be in a lot of trouble too, and so is Jared Kushner.
Yeah, all of this stuff, all of the trouble has already happened. We just don't see it yet because Mueller is that good. He's already got it all out, and I think this next little while is going to be like Christmas. There's going to be just a present all the time. The 12 days of Mueller are coming up. It's like
on the first day of Mueller, my true love gave to me.
I'm glad somebody's excited.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
this is the beginning of the end. It really is.
I will split the difference between the two of you because on some level, I'm as excited as you are. And I think it's a really big deal because for so long, Paul Manafort was like, I'm not going to talk. I'm going to take this all to trial. I'm very loyal to Donald Trump. So to hear now that he has decided to cooperate with the Mueller investigation, I do think is a pretty big deal. But at the same time, I don't know, even with all these pieces going together, like I can see how it looks like Donald Trump is involved in this. And I personally, my honest opinion is that he is. But at the same time, I also recognize that, like, I don't know, we live in some universe where Donald Trump's president to begin with. And so, like, is there sort of this possibility that it could turn out that, like, everybody else was involved and Donald really didn't know anything about it? I mean, sure. And like, I don't know. Maybe it's that I'm just that pessimistic because like, it feels like nothing that they throw at him sticks. I mean, this is literally the guy that said, I grab her by the what.
Yeah.
And like, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and like a whole, and now we know that he paid off an adult film star and like his lawyer pled guilty to that, which, she had been saying all along, and he may have paid off some other adult film star. So it's like, I don't know. It's just like because nothing ever sticks, it sometimes feels like when all is said and done, we're going to come to find out that like, these people did all of these things and did all this conspiracy, because I don't like the phrase collusion, because collusion actually isn't a crime. The crime is conspiracy.
Yes.
And Donald just didn't know anything about it. But on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know. Donald is it's either like he's too dumb or he's the mastermind and he obviously knew everything about it, because it's got to be one or the other. So that's how I'm feeling about it right now. But I'm also scared that like nothing is going to come of it and we're still going to be stuck right where we are.
Yeah. So my feeling is that he totally was in on it to begin with. There's plenty of articles out there detailing his connections to the Russian mob. The Russian mob is connected, of course, to Putin, and we all know how much Trump loves Putin. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, he's absolutely involved in the conspiracy, making him unfit for office. If there's a possibility that he didn't know and that he got played by all these different people, then he's stupid and ignorant and is also unfit for office. So he's either lying or he's stupid.
Right, exactly. So I just wanted to read a comment that we're getting from Gary Walker, and then we'll get Greg back in on this conversation. Gary says, another example of dumps America. Some vermin feel they can do anything they want. Laws are suddenly unimportant. Blame this whole miserable situation on Trump and his continuing barrage of verbal and tweeting garbage.
That's true. There was an editor of Stormfront that says he can't be held accountable for racism because Trump's not being held accountable for racism. That just happened this week.
And Ilyssa, I think you can actually feel me on this from your attorney side of things.
Yeah.
I need some receipts. I got smoke, but I don't have a fire, and nothing has leaked related to Trump or anything like that. I got people walking into people's homes and shooting them, and they might get off. And you mean to tell me that I should think for sure that something's going to happen to Trump? I'm not there yet.
I think you're right. I mean, look, and it just comes down on where you fall in terms of evidence. I mean, look, I'll give you an example. One of the classic examples that we talk to about people when you take basic evidence 101 in law school is the difference between direct evidence and circumstantial evidence, right? Direct evidence is I walk outside and I see it's raining, so I know it's raining. Circumstantial evidence is some people start coming into my home and they all have umbrellas and they're all wearing raincoats. I don't actually know it's raining because I haven't walked outside, but I can assume that it rained because if it wasn't raining, then why would everybody be coming in my house with raincoats and umbrellas? And so I understand where you're getting at right now, because right now it kind of feels like people are walking in with umbrellas, but I haven't actually seen the rain. And so the question becomes is that going to be good enough to convince you, but not just convince you, because here it's normally it would be convincing a jury, but of course, because we're talking about impeachment, which we're going to talk about a little more in a second after we come back from break, it's not convincing a jury of one's peers. It's convincing a jury of 100 senators, 66 of whom would have to vote actually to have Donald Trump removed. Look, that sort of leads us into this next question, which is do we actually expect Paul Manafort to be truthful? And assuming Paul Manafort does have dirt on Donald Trump, what does this potentially mean for Trump? And I think that sort of gets to what you're talking about, which is give me the receipts. So
yeah, give me the receipts. And also Manafort versus Trump, whose word did I want to take?
Neither one of them. They're both liars.
It's a toss-up. So I'm going to need more people besides Manafort and Trump weighing in on this when this investigation is all said and done.
That's a fair point. But here's the factor that neither of you are considering right now. Manafort does not have a choice but to give up what he knows to Mueller, or Manafort's going to die in prison.
Manafort's already going to die in prison.
Probably going to die in prison anyway. He's 70. But if he lies to Mueller, Mueller is getting him to give him those receipts that you're looking for. Mueller already knows everything. He already knows everything. There was a skit on Saturday Night Live about a year ago with, the comedian's name slips my mind. Do you know who I mean? She's always playing... Kate McKinnon, thank you. And she played Mueller, and she showed up on Weekend Update and going, I'm having a blast.
Oh, no,
some investigations, they leave little crumbs. Trump, they're leaving whole loaves, fresh baked loaves from Panera Bread. So the receipts are there. Mueller is keeping it all close to the vest because he wants it all out there. And when he finally announces his indictments and his case, it's all going to be there for you. So I understand where you're coming from, but trust me, it's coming.
But Chad, you made a point earlier that Mueller is running a tight operation. Nobody knows anything. So when you say he knows everything,
how do you know?
We actually know that he knows stuff, but we don't know if he has enough or knows what we need to know. And so that's my point. We don't know. And so until I know more, I'm not that excited.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. We're going to take a quick break in just about a minute. Look, there's been enough guilty pleas surrounding this to be it's not that there's, I'll say this. You're right. We don't have enough information necessarily to really know anything for sure about Trump directly. But there's been, between the Papadopoulos guilty plea, the Flynn guilty plea, the Michael Cohen guilty plea, which isn't necessarily related to Russia, but it could be. There's enough there to say this isn't a witch hunt. Okay?
To go back to her analogy, you don't know, you haven't seen the rain, but the puddles in your house are getting bigger.
Yeah, exactly. So on that note, we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we'll continue the conversation about the Trump-Russia scandal, and we'll talk more about impeachment. And we are back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio on WHCR 90.3 FM. My name's Ilyssa Fuchs. I am your political and legal correspondent. I am joined today by special guest host Chad R. MacDonald from The Good, The Chad, and The Ugly.
Hello.
And Gregory Nesmith from The Gregory Nesmith Show, The Underdog Stuff, which of course comes on right after this show right here on WHCR 90.3 FM. So before we went on break, we were talking about the new news about Paul Manafort and all the other things we know about the Trump-Russia scandal. And we got a comment from Robin Came, who says, but where there's so much smoke, we will have fire soon. And I think that's sort of like the disagreement a little bit that we're having here in the station, which is like, does all the smoke mean that the fire is definitely coming, or are we going to see a lot of smoke, but eventually it's just going to smolder out and nothing's going to happen? And I think that's a fair question to be raising. But to switch gears just for a second, it's not really switching gears. It's just sort of the next step in this conversation is assuming for a second that this smoke does turn into a full-blown fire, which, of course, as we discussed, may or may not happen. Then there becomes this question, which is, should the Democrats bring impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump if they win back the House in November? Right now, the Democrats do not control the House, so they cannot start impeachment proceedings. They just do not have the votes. But after the general election in November, there's a good chance, a very good chance, that Democrats are going to retake the House. There's a slight chance they could retake back the Senate, but it's, that's going to be sort of a toss-up. And even if they did, I just want to remind people, you need to have a 2/3 vote for removal. So just real quick before we jump into this question, just for those of you who don't know, just getting impeached doesn't mean you're actually removed from office. Impeachment is sort of like an indictment. You have to get 2/3 of the House to vote for articles of impeachment. If they do, there is then a trial held in the Senate where evidence is put on, evidence, that thing we were just talking about, and ultimately the senators act as the jury. And if 66% of the Senate, which is 2/3, 66 senators, decide to vote for removal, then the president is not just impeached, but removed. So as we saw in 1992 with Bill Clinton, he was impeached by the House, but they did not remove him from office. And then he actually went on to win a second term. And so that, of course, brings it back to the question I raised, which is, should the Democrats impeach Trump? Is that a good idea or not a good idea? We'll start with you, Greg.
My initial answer would be no, but then I always think back to the saying of it's always the right time to do the right thing. And so if he does findings of something that should be impeach him, but do it quickly. No pomp and circumstance, no long drawn out. Get the impeachment, get it on record. He won't be convicted in the Senate, and then let's move on and focus on 2020.
So whether or not I feel he should be impeached, I do feel that if the Democrats take the House, and especially if they get the Senate, he will be impeached. The issue with that, of course, is that impeachment is notoriously difficult to prove and make stick. It didn't really work with Clinton. And, I mean, you had someone like, for example, Aaron Burr. He was a vice president, and he was caught stockpiling what was he? Hang on, let me look this up.
Well, you look that up. I'm going to jump to a comment from Robin Came again. She says both the houses, but without both of the houses, meaning if we don't control the Senate, it doesn't matter. But Democrats can start other investigations.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that Robin said that, because that's actually my position. I don't think Democrats should impeach him, especially now that we're like just over 2 years from the 2020 election. And actually, by the time the November election rolls around, we'll be under 2 years to the next election. I actually think it would be expending a lot of political capital and not really getting anywhere, because you don't control the Senate. And even if Democrats did control the Senate, they would have to convince Republicans to vote with them in order to actually remove him. So I think that it wouldn't be a good idea to spend the political capital that way. Instead, I agree with Robin. Democrats should start other investigations, which essentially means for the next 2 years, Democrats would, they can file articles of impeachment if they wanted to, but I just don't think that's necessarily the best option. To me, it's like subpoena, investigate. Basically, do what Republicans did to Barack Obama over the Benghazi non-scandal for 2 years, and basically use that as a method to obstruct and delay, not let Republicans get anything done, not let them get any agenda done. Also, create a lot of political information in the news cycle that will be covered day in and day out and day in and day out, and essentially use that to club Trump over the head in 2020 so that he just can't win re-election.
Just a couple thoughts. You said that we'll be potentially like 2 years out from the next election.
Correct.
I would actually go a step further and say we'll be only about 6 months out from the start of the campaigning for that next election. And with that being said, I put a play on words with investigate. I think Democrats should be investigating what do black women voters want, what do suburban women want, what do independents who voted for Obama but then voted for Trump want, what do those folks want? And if they don't want impeachment, if they want to talk about jobs and healthcare and things like that, that's what they should be spending their time on next year, and not impeachment and subpoenas.
Yeah, now to build on both of that, which I would agree with, the point that I trailed off on before was about Aaron Burr. Now, he was a former vice president, and he was caught stockpiling supplies and gathering a force to take over some of the lands that would eventually be obtained through the Louisiana Purchase. That is pretty much almost a definition of treason right there, but it was so hard to argue in court that they didn't even charge him for that. No president has been charged with bribery, which would cause, which would call for impeachment. What exactly constitutes a high crime or a misdemeanor? That would have to be grounds for impeachment. And treason, of course, is the toughest one to prove. A lot of it, when it comes to impeachment, is going to depend upon what Mueller releases when he releases it.
Yeah, I don't think people want to hear some of the reality, which is the best way to remove Donald Trump from office
is to vote him
out.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a sitting president, convicted in the Senate and kicked out of office. So guess what? This is a lot of style and not much substance and a bit of a waste of time, even though folks don't want to hear that.
No, and sure, and not for nothing, we always talk about paying attention to history, right? People always say, remember history so we don't repeat it. That's a big thing we've heard since Donald Trump's election. Well, guess what? If you want to remember history so that you don't repeat it, well, two things. One, 1992, it's the economy, stupid. So that goes right off of what you're saying. If Democrats, an alternative thing they can do, and sure, they can open up investigations and they should, but put out a budget. A budget tells us what your priorities are. Tell us what you're going to do. Tell us how you want to spend our money if you were to, get elected, get the presidency in 2020, because presumably they'll already win back the House and, assuming they win back the House. Put out a budget. Tell us we want to allocate less money for this and more money for education, more money for infrastructure, more money for this, more money for that. That tells us what your priorities are. And that fits with what do the voters want. Absolutely. But the other thing we should remember about history and repeating itself is when Bill Clinton was impeached and they could not get him removed because they did not have the votes to find him guilty and he was actually acquitted, that allowed him to not just remain in office, but to get reelected because he was able to run on that. Yep. And so we run the risk of, if we try to go that step of impeaching Donald Trump, it could blow back in our faces. It could motivate Donald Trump's base and the people that are going to go out and vote for Donald Trump. And we could end up losing the 2020 election because we give them ammunition, for like this being a political witch hunt if we don't actually get the votes for removal, which we probably won't get because there's not enough Republicans that will actually vote for a removal. So my personal opinion is just that it's politically a bad idea. It's legally a bad idea. And there's so many alternative things that we can be doing that would put us better positioned for 2020 and 2022. Chad, I know you wanted to jump in and then we'll loop back around and we'll go to a quick break before we get to final comments.
Yeah, I think I would agree with a lot of that. With me, I don't want to just see him impeached. I want to see him imprisoned. My wife put it best one day. She was like, I can't wait for the day when that entire family and all of the people who are involved in this are run out of town on a rail because they all deserve prison time, as far as I'm concerned. That being said, yeah, if we try to impeach him and it doesn't work, that's going to backfire. So let's not do that.
Let's give the voters what they want, and that is, what are you going to do for me to make life better?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So on that note, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll take some final thoughts, and then we'll close it out for the day. Thanks so much for staying with us. And we are back. This is Ilyssa Fuchs. This is WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. You're listening to Let Your Voice Be Heard radio. We just were talking about Donald Trump and the ongoing and never-ending Trump-Russia scandal. And I sort of think we all came out in the place where, we don't necessarily think impeachment is really the best option, although I know there are many Democrats and liberals who will disagree, who actually think that if Democrats do not file articles of impeachment, that they're essentially, they have no cojones, as we say, since I can't say the other word on the air. So anyways, what do you guys think? What's your final thoughts on this, and what do you think we can do to continue to resist the Trump administration moving forward, Greg?
My final thoughts are, let's go figure out what some of the main voter blocs want going forward. And for me, the goal is register to vote. Go out with some people you know and get them to the polls, and continue to do whatever you're doing locally to make a difference.
Absolutely. Chad?
So every day it seems the New York Times or the Washington Post or NBC Nightly News or CNN or somebody is running the, "Hi, we're going to go to the heartland and talk to the Trump voter." Stop that. All right? You cannot reach Trump voters. Trump voters voted for Trump because he's not a politician. Now that Trump's in all this hot water and getting caught paying porn stars and leaving people to die in Puerto Rico and all of these different crimes that now he's been implicated in, they say, oh, but all politicians do that. There's no reaching these people. They are unreasonable. The people we need to reach are the people who do not vote. So find the people who do not vote. Get them registered. Take them to the polls. Take the day off if you can. There are poor people in poor sections of this country that cannot afford to take the day off. Find a way to get them to the polls, because the Republicans do not want them to vote. And anyone who's telling you that your vote is not important simply does not want you to vote. And that's all there is to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, look, I couldn't agree with the both of you more. I'll harp back to the thing that I mentioned before. I mean, as for Democrats that are already in office, I think they need to tell us what their priorities are, so that we know what they're stand for and not just what they're running against. I mean, it's fine. We understand they're against Donald Trump and that they want to do everything to obstruct and resist his agenda. So do we. But it's not good enough just to tell us what you are against. You have to tell us what you stand for. That is incredibly important. And it's up to our elected officials to come out and give us their platform and tell us what they stand for. But as for us, yes, it is really important that we get involved, and especially at the local level. We saw right here in New York, like a 10-term congressman, Joe Crowley, get ousted by a 28-year-old who had never run for office before, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He was leading her in the polls by 30 points, and basically took for granted the fact that he thought he was going to win that election. So we need to get more young people involved in politics, get out there, help young people campaign. There's a lot of things that we can be doing to resist the Trump administration. Go out there and vote. Get your friends to register to vote. Get your friends out there to volunteer on campaigns. We have a general election coming up in just about 2 months right now. And there are a lot of candidates that need your help, that could use people that can get out there, volunteer, knock on doors, canvass for them, hand out literature at subway stations, all the things that I was doing over the past couple of months for the local elections here. Those are also going to be happen at the national level. Continue to call your senators, continue to call your elected officials. There is so much we can be doing to continue to resist the Trump administration and put ourselves in a position to win, not just in 2018, but in 2020. On that note, thank you so much for listening to Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio this morning. We really appreciate it. We will be back next week on Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio here on WHCR 90.3 FM. I, of course, will not be here next week, unfortunately. I have a very special event that I have to be, but Stanley and Selena will be back on. And then after that show, we will have to take a quick hiatus due to some construction that's going to be going on here at WHCR, but we will keep you posted. We're going to try and still live stream the show on Facebook, and we really, really thank you so much for sticking with us this morning. Have a great Sunday. Greg's show is coming up next. Greg, tell us all about your show and how it's coming up next.
Coming up next, the Gregory Nesmith Show, a special delivery of underdog stuff, and today's episode will be Who Are You Fighting For? And we'll get into it. A special mix of politics and personal development coming up at noon at the top of the hour.
Thank you so much.